What the part that we missed there was about you're traveling on Sturgeon, and you were traveling then with Phil Bernaski, and McLaren's trading post was still visible.
Yes, so the parts of the walls were still standing. That is right.
And Shevlin Clark were coming in and cutting, and there were beautiful pines there.
Oh, that island, pardon me for interrupting. Yeah, that is a white pine as thick as it grow over the ground. No kidding. Yeah, they cut her right off.
You tried to have Mr. Jameson save the island.
Yeah, but he couldn't. You know, he had no. He couldn't do nothing. You know what I mean? He had a hard time to save a little bit of, you know, the little stand of white pine there right at French Lake there, if it's still standing.
Yes.
Thanks
to him, that's the only stand on French Lake.
Yes. Yeah, they logged every place.
I had heard that he went at his own expense to Toronto to try to save those. Had you heard?
He was, pardon me, the only man that he took orders from was the deputy minister. The park had their own law statutes. A mounted police or a custom officer could go in there, but nobody else could go in there without his permission. They had their own law books. And Kane was the deputy minister. Of course, he was in with the big lumber companies too, because he had a winter home in Florida. He had saddle horse. He had a big estate alongside of Sir John Eaton's up in Toronto. Mr. Jameson was down there. He saw what was going on a little bit. At that time, deputy minister only got about $6,000 a year. How can you have a big estate alongside of Sir John Eaton, the big tea Eaton company, and have a winter home in Florida and the saddle horses and everything? You know what I mean? Money's got to come from someplace. Excuse me.
5 minutes, and we'll play her back a bit.
And check it again. Like right now, I've been asked to give information about Mr. Jameson because they were proposing his name for one of the lakes in the park that didn't have a name. And I was going to talk to, I was going to ask you, and I was going to ask Bob Halliday as well. You know, they like the person to have done something special or in connection with the park. Now, you worked under Jameson for all the time that you were there.
Except for Mr. Ron a little bit.
Yes. And Art Madsen had a few stories like that about him charging the Rangers sort of, in a way, he was making a bit of money.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
And I just wondered, you know, how people who worked for him felt about him.
Mm-hmm. Well, pardon me, he had some, there was some good points, but I see the trouble was, the trouble with human flesh, or sometimes some people abuse power. He had so much power that, the Liberal Party called him, they nicknamed him King John of the Quetico, you know what I mean? But, power went to his head, and he was, I'll tell you, if you brought in a poacher, he had no mercy. You know what I mean, a poacher. Somebody was caught trapping in the park, whether you had a big family, or whether you were starving or not, the sentence was either $300 or 3 months in jail. That was the standard court procedure. He was the magistrate. He tried you right there and then. You get me? Yeah, that's right. No mercy. So the Rangers, you know, there was no work. The people were starving, although they had no business trapping in there. But on the other hand, people with big families and stuff, and you send them to jail for 90 days, well, the county or the district or somebody had to feed that family, eh? And he wouldn't. But once in a while, he ran into a snag with these, when a treaty Indian was caught from LaCroix or something, he'd give him 90 days, but the Indian agent quite often would appeal it and bring it up in front of a district court judge. Maybe the district court judge, which I knew very well, a very able man. His son is a judge now in Fort Frances. The late Judge McLennan was a very able district court judge, and he believed in fair play. He'd cut the sentence down from maybe 2 weeks or whatever he could do. You know what I mean? There wasn't very many that could appeal it to a district court. You get me? The Indians could because the Indian agent had, he was looking after the Indian affairs and they had taxpayers' money to work with, where some white man had nothing, you know what I mean? Well, I know quite a few went to jail for 90 days because they couldn't pay the fine.
It must have been awfully hard on the Indians to suddenly be told, get out of the Quetico in 1909.
Yeah. Oh, pardon me. In that time, if I had, no, I don't. I'm not positive. You can check. I'm sure you got records someplace. See, Jameson wasn't superintendent that time.
No.
I believe it was Colonel Young. I believe. Apparently, he drafted up the laws and the statute books and everything. I guess he must have been a very well-educated man. He had to be. He drafted up the law statutes for the Quetico. And he did, and he was the one, I guess, helped to map out the Quetico to what I've been told. But then after Colonel Young, there was a superintendent by the name of
A.J. McDonald?
Yes, and then Brother Hugh McDonald after him again.
No, that's wrong. It's not a brother at all.
No relation.
No relation. A.J. McDonald came from Cochrane District. He was a real woodsman.
Yes.
And his brother did come and work, but he worked just on maintenance there at French Lake. And later, Hugh McDonald came from Atikokan.
Yes, that's right.
Evil Lake, but
yes.
There was no relation.
No relations. Well, he was. I met him before he passed away. He was let out or something, and poor man ended up with nothing. But he was superintendent for a long time. Hugh McDonald.
Yes, there was something about something wrong with his books.
Yes, he took the license, which was a lot of money that time. There was $1,200 license, tourist license fees. That he was a heavy boozer, and he spent the government's money. You know what I mean? But they didn't send him over the road, but they confiscated his fur coat and everything else. You know what I mean? Oh yeah. Hugh McDonald. Yeah, I knew him before he passed away. He was living in Atikokan there.
What I thought I'd do, just to do a little different right now, is I'm going to try and stick on this chronological, year by year. But I just wanted to ask you about, because I know that you have some lovely stories about some of the people that you've met in the park. And Art was telling me about a cabin on Quanipi, and there was the name Lindbergh carved in the wall. Now I understand that the name Lindbergh is common in Minnesota.
Yes.
And that is where John
Colonel
came from. Did he ever travel in the park?
Not to my knowledge. I never knew of him. I was stationed on Basswood for many, many years. And I never, the bulk of the tours, I would say roughly 90% of them or more in those days came in from Ely up Fall Lake into Basswood. And they checked at either cabin 16 or cabin 11, Kings Point. I've never known him. No. But I met, pardon me if I'm not throwing you off, you correct me. There used to be a Professor U.S. Grant. He was a head of the mining, he was a professor of mining geology at the Northwestern University, who was a grandson of the late General Grant, who was President of the United States. He used to bring a lot of field students up in the summer. He knew this country better than I think any Canadian. He was all through this country, and he told me, and I was quite young, that sometime this would be a great mining country, and he wasn't too far off, you know what I mean? And see, that's going back many years ago too. He used to bring up maybe 40, 50 students, hire guides and everything, and go for what they call field education or whatever terms you want to use. Yeah. No, I never heard of Lindbergh, but many others though.
When he brought the students, he'd hire guides at Winton and
Yes, that is right, and he went all through any place where there was mineralized rock. He has been around Sapawi, Atikokan, and all through the Quetico. That was about a 2-month job in the summer with these students.
Did you ever meet this other man I've heard about by the name of Con?
Mel Kahn, yes, he was some kind of a professor at
Illinois?
in Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan. Excuse me, or it could be Illinois, but I'm pretty sure it's Ann Arbor. But anyway, I knew Kahn. They call him Dr. Kahn.
Was he a young man in those?
Well, no, he was a man maybe 35 or 40.
In the 30s.
Yes, that is right. And he was, pardon me, I think he was one of the first to find out about the moose getting the disease. There were hundreds and hundreds of moose died in the Quetico and all over the country here. They wasn't shot off. They'd go blind and they'd got some kind of a distemper, liver disease. He was the man first to discover what was causing it. They were making all kinds of guesses. In those days, we didn't have any game and fish biologists in this part of the country at all. Do you know what I mean?
What was he like? Did you talk to him?
He was, I think, a Jewish descent. Some people liked him. He was very nice to me. I know one thing. He was a well-educated man, and he worked hard. I know that much. You know what I mean? In fact, we trapped some otter, the carcasses for him, and sent them, and many other types of animals, the carcasses. I guess they must have had quite a lab there. If I have it right, it was Ann Arbor, Michigan. If I have it right. Now, I could be wrong.
Do you want to hit her?
Used to work for, you know where Bob Handberg's resort is on Lac
On
LaCroix?
Lac LaCroix, yes.
Well, his father-in-law had that. Ralph Campbell had it. So Madsen and Richardson, they loaded up a square-stern canoe and they headed for Saginaw, up the border from LaCroix up into Basswood River, Basswood Lake and on. And boy, times were tough. And they went up there, but they survived.
They had no work, did they?
No
They had
work or
way
no
of
money.
And no money.
No money. They had a tough time.
The logging had stopped because of the
Everything was
depression.
5 years, nothing. And Art trapped a little bit, but they got enough. And that big Scotchman, Richardson, he became wealthy afterwards, so he hung on tight. And a good businessman. God, I think they eat oatmeal there probably, and rabbits or whatever they could get, for a long, long time. Because there was no money.
Where did Jock Richardson come from?
Scotland.
Oh, straight from Scotland.
Yes. I met him in 1926 too. He was a professional blacksmith. He blacksmithed for Chevron Clark Lumber Company. Richardson did. And then he got with this Mr. Campbell, the late Ralph Campbell, that has that resort on Lac LaCroix. Handberg has it now.
Ralph Campbell. Did he ever work for Chevron Clark?
Way back in the early days, before my time, he was a clerk for a short time. Then he was a fire ranger on Beaver House Lake for a short time. He was he was partly, or he was an educated man, Campbell, to start with. He's he originally came from Fredericton, New Brunswick. That's for Campbell. See, Handberg married his daughter. I don't know whether she's living or dead.
Yes, she is.
Living. Wonderful.
Her name is Isabel.
Could be. And then used to buy fur. Fur buyer.
He won't even give you time to eat.
No, that's okay. Pardon me. And listen, I'm going to save this sandwich. I had plenty, and it was real good. No kidding.
When Art and Jock started out for Lac LaCroix, or for Saginaw, had they been bringing supplies in from Flanders? Had they been driving supplies in from Flanders for Ralph?
Yes,
Campbell?
up as far as Beaver House Lake, excuse me, and then they had to go down through Woolsey Lake, and that they freighted that way for
in
Campbell.
the wintertime.
And summer too. Summer too. See, Chevron Clark had a road excuse me, before my time, up as far from Flanders to Beaver House. You know where that is, eh?
I've walked.
I ranged a little bit there too at one time.
Mm.
I've been pretty well all over the Quetico. I don't think there's a very few lakes that I haven't been into. You know, my time mostly on snowshoes or canoe.
Shan asked me to ask you about a man a ranger, who drowned, I think on Shade Lake.
There was a ranger drowned before my time, supposed to drown off of Lookout Island. You know where Lookout Island is?
Yes, I know that story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was very strange because
yes.
He just took the canoe. The other man he
yeah,
left.
Bob Oglesteen, I knew him too.
Oh, yes, and they just went. He just went in the canoe to get some fish for
yeah,
supper.
Oglesteen's supposed to stay on shore and cook supper, and he supposed to upset. I don't know how Oglesteen ever got the canoe back, unless the wind blew it in. I think that if I have the man's name right.
No, they found the canoe. The Oglesteen walked by the next day when he didn't come back at night and didn't come back in the morning. Oglesteen walked out to French Lake.
He must have been a good swimmer, because apparently it was in the spring of the year, and Lookout Island's away out in the middle of it's quite wide there.
No, they in the journal that I read, they were on the mainland.
Oh, on mainland. See, I heard.
You could be right.
I heard on Lookout Island.
Right.
See, they stopped to. Oglesteen. He said, according to Oglesteen's story, this Englishman, Stubbs, I think it was his name, was going to go out and get a trout, and he was Oglesteen was supposed to, get things ready for supper. He carried everything in the pack sack, you know what I mean? And apparently he upset and drowned it, but they that's before my time, but I seen the hooks and stuff. They had everything. They grappled, they hunted all over there. They never found him. But Stubbs is supposed to have about $1,000 on him, and I don't know, whether he was drowned there or he might have been 10 miles away in the woods someplace. You never know. You know what I mean? This Oglesteen was a bad actor.
Oh. Because I remember there was a telegram from Jameson to the RCMP, and they all, as you say, it was in the spring when it was very difficult.
Pardon me, now.
To get in.
Excuse me. That happened in McDonald's time, not Jameson's time.
Oh, well, then it was McDonald
yes.
that called the RCMP.
Yeah, Hugh McDonald.
Yes. Good for you. I guess you don't forget when you've lived with them.
Well, some things I like. I missed a lot of things too because young and crazy and everything else. You know what I mean? But once in a while.
Did you meet American girls in canoe groups?
Not so much. Some, but it was mostly so-called middle-aged or older people, and the most of them were very fine. The most of them was either business or professional people in the early days. Yeah, some extremely wealthy people too, from Milwaukee and that area.
And what did they come for? Just to go back to
yeah, some of the lakes in the Quetico was named after some of them.
Because it was so pretty.
Oh, yes. No, thanks, Ted. Thanks. No.
They seemed to always be very happy when they met a ranger and could talk
to
to
him. That is
him.
right, and they were good, honest people. Good people. Good people. Yeah, Key Kafer, the man, he was a big paper industrialist. I have plenty for now, thanks. Who was a brother of the man that makes these Mercury motors, and Dr. Weeb, any amount of them. And Arnold, president of the Northwestern Life Insurance Company, I met a brother-in-laws to the late Dr. Mayo, the founder of the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Belfour, and the Mason brothers. There are French names, Masson. But Dr. Belfour and we say Mason, the Masson brothers, they were former Canadian doctors. In fact, I guided Dr. Belfour, a brother-in-law of the late Dr. Mayo, the founder of the Yes Valley. And we used to take a leave of absence in the summer once in a while and guided a little bit. We could make more money. We got $8 a day when you couldn't get $1 a day here. Are you kidding me?
Art told me about doing that, taking leave of absence in the
you
summer.
can make a few bucks, yeah. We got $8 a day, although it was hard work, but I liked it. Canoe.
As a guide in the summer,
Mhm.
you would put up the tent for them, cook the meals for them.
And try and catch them some fish and fry the fish. But some of them were real good, though. Some of them would help you, you know. Most of them would help you. And they'd take some women along too with them, their wives. And everybody would grab a pack sack or something, you know, because you had a lot of stuff when you went on some of them canoe trips. I think Art Madsen, which I never did with a canoe party, tourist, Art Madsen made many trips around Hunter's Island, and that's a long paddle, you know what I mean. Of course, there's lots of guides from Ely that made that regular every summer, lots of them. Some good guides too.
Did you paddle when you
Yeah, all
guided?
paddling. Yeah, it was all paddles and canvas canoes. Some of them portages, I guess you've been through the Quetico too, eh? Some of them are not very smooth to walk on either, eh? You know, to land the canoe, and you got to be careful you don't punch a hole in it. And you know, some of the people are accustomed to canoes, some are not. And yeah, you had a big job. You slept at night, you know, when you went to bed.
You know that chain up from Silver Falls, that must have been rather
that was
frightening with newcomers.
Yes, that's right. There was a, pardon me, you know where the falls comes from down through Shelley, the falls that runs into White's Lake. It's Smoke Falls.
Oh, yes, yes.
There was a man and his wife from Chicago went over that falls and survived. You, if you please, you can check with Art Madsen.
From the top? They
From
were
the
coming
top,
from
they were coming down Knippy Way, down into Sturgeon, and they misjudged the portage, and over the falls they went, and they got scratched up a little bit. They lost everything, and they got ashore. They had nothing except a pair of shorts on, and there's some rangers. I wasn't with that group. They were going to build a new cabin at Sturgeon Narrows, and they went up there just to see if there's any timber there, and there was a man and his wife sitting on the shore there. And it wasn't all bad, because a Sports Afield or Field and Stream, one of the magazines at that time offered $500 for the best outdoor story, and they wrote up the story and they got $500. They came back the next year again. It didn't stop them, but it was lucky that they ever survived. You know what I mean? Lucky. You know,
They weren't too badly bruised?
No, not. I met and talked to them the following year. No. I know the rangers that found them too. You know what I mean? Pardon me. What do you have?
I was going to ask you about the Wawiag River. Did you ever go up the Wawiag?
Yes, right up to the Moss Mine. Yes.
Had you ever heard the story of Blackstone up there?
Blackstone was very active up in that area. That's long before my time. But he found the first producing gold mine in the province of Ontario, known as the Moss Mine, down here south of Cashaboy. It's known later on as the Ardeen Mine, and it's closed now. But he was the one that found that the gold there, Blackstone.
Did you hear about him sending a piece to the Queen?
No, but I heard of he before the white man got a hold of the mine. He used to go and pan some gold and take it to Duluth. Maybe 1,000, according to the story, according to the old Ted Detbarn, which I have a picture of him here, that I ranged with for a good many years down there. Blackstone would disappear and go and pan some gold, and then he'd take it to Duluth and sell it for $1,000 or whatever he could get. You know what I mean?
It's unusual to find gold that you could pan in Ontario.
Yes, that is right. But there was there is right on this lake, it's very skimpy though, scarce, what is known as string gold or free gold. There's been a little panning on through here too, but down there he found it.
I've always wondered if anyone ever would, after being in British Columbia, where they pan it all the time in the streams.
Yes,
I always, when I came back, I thought, I'm going to start panning in Ontario.
Yeah, no, they'd find it in seams or veins where it comes to the surface, but there's not much of it visible. Most of it is very deep.
But this was the Moss Mine.
Yes.
South of Cashaboy.
Yes, that's right. South of Birchall Lake.
And this was the same Blackstone from the Lacroix,
According to what the old ranger told me.
and it was Teddy Detburn that
Yes,
told
that
you.
is right.
I wonder if Teddy knew him.
Well, for sure, I'm sure he did, because Teddy came to Quentin and, probably, and Hearn to the other old ranger, maybe about the year of 1900.
1900.
Yes, when they came up from, Detburn was from Schenectady, New York, and Hearn was a native of England.
How did Teddy Detburn choose to come to this area?
Well, he worked, pardon me, when he came up from the eastern, from New York, come up into Minnesota, he worked in the lumber camps at first, and then most of the rangers on Basswood Lake were all Americans. The communications from the north end was very, very slow, and I met many of them down there around Ely, such as Gunder Graves, Emil Johnson, and many others that natives of Minnesota who were park rangers in the Quetico on the border there.
Can you tell me anything about Gunder Graves? Because his name is in our files.
I guided with Gunder Graves. There was another next. I would put Gunder Graves as a guide and woodsman next to John Linklater. He was a man up in years when I got acquainted with him. He park ranged with Bill Darby in the Quetico. I noticed something last summer at government headquarters, French Lake.
Are you okay still?
Oh, I'm okay. No trouble. I enjoy this. If you people can endure me, no trouble
I'll
at
be
all.
wishing I brought my tent. So he was a very capable outdoors person.
A great guide.
Great
and
guide.
trapper too.
And good storyteller.
Oh yes, he was born in the old country, Scandinavian descent. He was Scandinavian. One of the best guides, probably one of the best in that area. Until the booze got the best of him. You know what I mean?
And he was a ranger for
yes.
a short while.
He ranged with Bill Darby, and then with an old fellow by the name of Jeff Seeley. You could maybe, if you ever down around Winton, you could ask Bill Hansen or Bob Hayes. I don't know whether Hayes knew Seeley very good. Poor Seeley, I guess he could write his own name. That's about all. But when he'd make out his always joke about him when he was making, we had to keep a daily diary, what we did and what we didn't do. And when the wind would change, Jeff Seeley would mark in his diary all around wind, instead of changeable wind. You know what I mean? I knew Jeff real well. He quit the park and then he had a store. He was an American. He had a little store at Winton, Minnesota until he passed away.
It's interesting because I'm reading some of those diaries now.
Uh-huh.
And one of them I am reading is, or have read, was, I think, Fred Atkins. And he had some way of describing the wind, too, that was different.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I knew, I ranged a short time with Atkins, too, a little bit. Fred. He was originally from a place called Invermay, Saskatchewan. Therefore, he was born. And he wasn't born there. He was born in Chicago. And his father moved up in the early days up to Saskatchewan and took up a homestead or a farm. And he was a war veteran in the Canadian Army. He served a long time overseas.
First war?
Yes, First War. During the Depression, he had no job. He went down here, they had what they called relief or dole or whatever it is. He went down here to Thunder Bay to get relief because he had quite a big family and nothing to eat. And there was an old country Scotchman, a pretty strict old fella. He was in charge of this dole system. And when this Scotchman was interviewing Atkins for relief. He asked Atkins where he's from. And Atkins says, Chicago. He talked kind of funny. This old Scotchman says, you came a hell of a long ways looking for relief. So after he got talking to him and found out that he lived in Saskatchewan, that he served in the Canadian Army for 4 or 5 years, and they give him a handout, no trouble at all.
He couldn't get enough off the land, to.
No. Times are pretty rough. Oh, I know a lot of good, honest people. There's shack and lumberjacks and stuff, you know. 5 years, long time without work, you know, and no money, you know. A lot of good, honest people had to go poaching. If there was a bee or any place, they went and got it, or starved, one of the other. And the wardens wasn't too tough on them either. The wardens they'd come and look your cabin over something. They wouldn't look it over, but they'd make a visit, you know, keep you in line. But they never hunted too hard, you know, because they knew what people were up against. You know.
Did you ever eat sturgeon?
A little bit. I shot one time on Drury River. You know, and they come in the spring and the in shallow water.
They don't come up there anymore, I guess, because of the beaver dams.
That's too bad.
Bob Halliday asked me that in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
They come up the lower Pickerel River, but not the Duriviere.
Moline River used to have lots of them too, and the Indians used to spear them. See, they own a reserve on Lake LaCroix there, a long ways there. I used to watch them spear them along on the reserve side.
On the Namakan down
No,
the
no,
St.
Moline
Falls?
River, from Tanner's Lake down. You've been down that way, eh?
Yes, from Tanner's. You never saw them taking them from below there, below the reserve.
No, not. I never was down below the reserve, known as Snake Falls. I never. But this way though, from the reserve towards the Moline River, they used to spear them there and net them too. Use 8-inch gill net with a heavy cord to hold them.
That would give you enough food if you collected it in the spring.
Yes.
And dried it.
Yeah.
That I sometimes think that perhaps they didn't like sturgeon well enough to put up enough for the whole winter.
Well, the old-time Indian was a good provider. The old-time full-blooded so-called pagan Indian. He was a craftsman, a good woodsman. But when they got contaminated with the whites and all kinds of breeds and everything, they lost most of that art, you know. That's my experience with them.
So you see, at the time of the Depression, when people like Fred Atkins would have to go and get help, even the Indians seemed to have times of starvation.
Oh, they had a hard time too. Of course, they had the federal government back them up. They could
but before that, before that,
yes.
I thought if they kept enough sturgeon or put enough sturgeon aside for the winter,
some of them did
to get you through.
Yeah, and they used to dry blueberries and many things, you know. And they used to shoot moose and deer and smoked it and many things. But most of that art is gone, I think, to the best of my knowledge. Yeah.
When you were you ever told anything about Indians living at the mouth of the Wawiag?
Pardon me, there was an Indian reserve up there and it's still Indian territory. They can say what they like, according to the amount of police that I talked to. There's an Indian reserve on the Wawiag River, and that, whether they're there or not, that's Indian territory. See, the park claimed it, which, according to the Mounties that I talked to, it was illegal. That didn't belong to lands and forests at all. It's still... According to the mounted police, that land is still Indian territory.
This was mounted police in Fort Frances?
Sergeant Davison, he became an inspector for all Western Canada at one time. But he was in this country. And I heard him debating no reflections against this man here, but I heard him and Carnahan and McEwen, two COs, were talking about it. And Davison claims that under the treaty, that's whether the Indians live there or not, that's Indian territory and nobody else's.
Would he still be alive, that man?
Davison, I wouldn't know. I lost all track. He was stationed here in Thunder Bay for a long time. A very, very fine man. Davison.
And then after Thunder Bay, he was
He went to Winnipeg, and then he got promoted way, way up. I heard that he retired and went to British Columbia, but I'm not positive. You know, I lost track of him. Yeah, see, the flu killed the most of the Indians off on that Wawiag. They all belong, though, that Wawiag Reserve and the one on Lake LaCroix was affiliated. They were together, like. I knew.
They were all related to each other?
Well, yes, and they communicated between the two reserves.
They had two different chiefs, though.
Oh, yes, yeah. I don't know who the chief was on
Wawiak.
Wawiak, but I knew an old-time Indian who became chief of LaCroix afterwards. See, the flu killed the most of them. The ones that the flu didn't kill in 1918 or whatever it was, they scattered all over creation.
Some went to Grand Portage and some went to Lac LaCroix.
And Saginaw and many other places. Yeah. Old Joe Moose, full-blooded Indian, he was chief for a short time on Lake LaCroix Reserve, and he could talk some English. He told me. Yeah, the flu wiped the most of them out.
You would visit at Lac LaCroix
Oh,
Reserve?
once in a while. We had an old park ranger cabin at the mouth of that river, the Moline River there, close to Reserve, and they, no matter what you left in there, there was no lock on the door. They never touched it. They never touched it. No, never. But after the tours, later on, I guess you couldn't keep a lock on anything, any place. You know what I mean?
Okay.
No, thanks. I'm doing real good. Thank you.
The chief there was Joe Moose.
Joe Moose was a chief, and then after that was Charlie Ottertail.
Oh, yes, and you knew Charlie.
Oh, real well, and he showed me. He had a book. Looked like, I don't know whether you ever saw years ago, we had them old liquor permit books, a little green book with all the chiefs from Thunder Bay right through Lake of the Woods. Their name was spelled in Indian and also in Indian, and their finger, they couldn't write, and they signed their signature with their fingertip. Charlie Ottertail showed me that that old book that he had was old Blackstone was the chief at that time. You know what I mean? On LaCroix.
That would have been 1875. That would have been close to the beginning of treaty
time. Yeah. He had the book there. Old Charlie did. It might be on the reserve yet. Maybe if there's any of the Ottertails left, they could have it. Yeah, and you know, the only way an Indian will show you anything if he likes you. And if you don't like it, he won't tell you nothing or show you nothing. That's my experience with Indians. What's that?
Do they take them? Chainsaw.
Boy, oh boy, that's nice. Oh, nice.
Why did you call it a liquor book that they're named?
Well, pardon me, it looked like a little green liquor book, a little regulation book. Old Charlie was all right.
Did you know anyone by the name of Whitefish on that reserve?
No, I didn't. Not Whitefish. There was Ottertails and a lot of Ottertails and Jordans and Labatts. That Labatt goes away back to the early voyagers. A French name, you know. They got
Labatt.
Labatt, yeah.
I've met Eddie Opine.
I didn't know him. He probably popped up after I.
You know, there are those ponies on
Indian ponies? Oh, yes. Oh,
Tell
yeah.
me about what you saw. Were they used to no, it's okay.
Oh, yeah. They haul wood and things like that. In fact,
Were there many
I wouldn't know for sure the amount. Well, there was probably a dozen or more of them. They lived to be a great age, 40, 50 years old, that type of an Indian ponies. In fact, Jock Richardson had some old Tom Ottertail, a brother of Charlie Ottertail. He walked a couple of Indian ponies from Lake LaCroix right to Saginaw Lake, right up the border in the wintertime. With a toboggan, for Richardson. But see, by law, federal law,
Is it moving now?
by federal law, you were starting to say.
They
The
wasn't
Indians.
supposed to sell them ponies unless they got an okay from the Indian agent. And whatever money they got for them had to be distributed amongst the whole band, which left the owner with very little, you know.
And you had heard that this was one of the reasons that they became indolent.
Yes,
in a way,
that's right, yeah.
Because whatever was earned by any one belonged to everybody.
That is, that's what I've been told by some of the Indians, told me that, yeah.
The ponies, you were saying that they did actually put up wild hay. And,
Some of them had some ambition for them, yeah.
And they would also get they would also get oats from Ralph Campbell.
After he moved in there to LaCroix. Those ponies got to be like almost like a moose. They were browsers too, because you know there wasn't much food for them. And there was no way for the Indians to get out. Either they came up through Crane Lake or something, and you know, as a rule, they don't plan ahead too much. You know what I mean?
What was the story about the ponies? Did you hear that these were ponies that had come from the plains?
Yes. Pardon me. That.
From the Sioux Indians?
Yes. Yes. The Sioux. Now, I met an Indian here, and John Linklater told me too that the Sioux used to come up into the lake regions in the northern Minnesota and up here. They fought the Ojibwe Indians right here in this lake. They know that for sure. And the ponies and many other things was either captured or traded between the Plains Indians and the Indians up north here. Those ponies came off of the plains from someplace, and they came probably from South America. Well, for someone, I can't tell you why, but they do live, they claim, for 30, 40 years old or better.
Had you ever heard that when they fall in the lake, they hold their breath and pop up like a little top?
Pardon me, I haven't. I've seen other domestic horses in the water, and they're almost helpless. Mm-hmm. But it's possible that, you know, that like a moose, they probably train themselves to get out. Yeah.
When you traveled up the Wawiag or in the Wawiag area, were you told that there was that a chief had lived in a certain house on a beach there, or who had lived in any of the houses?
No, they were all gone, and there was just tumbled down shacks and stuff. You know what I mean? There was nothing. When I went through there was nobody living there at all. Nothing but grass and parts of old wigwams and walls. Then the tourists, anything that was left behind, the tourists packed it away. You know,
Were you told any stories about Silver Falls? Were there any stories?
No, not to my knowledge. I haven't.
Or about a child that was buried on an island by Silver Falls?
No, I haven't heard that either. No. Probably Madsen might be able to.
Tempest Benson.
Oh yeah, I know Tempest. Yeah.
Do you?
Oh yes,
I know. She's a very gentle person.
Yes. Yeah. I know her brothers at one time, Frank and Mike. They park ranged at one time. Mm-hmm. I knew the old father. I knew the father of that outfit, old Jack Powell.
Why was he called Andrew Jackson Powell?
I never heard of that.
Oh. Somebody told me that.
He was a native of Michigan. And old Ted Branham, the ranger that I worked with on Basswood Lake, met Jack Powell, came from Michigan and worked in the lumbering woods on the American side of Basswood when old Ted Dedbrand was working in the camps down there in those days.
On South Shore of Basswood?
Yes, so they logged all through their Prairie Portage. That was big business over there.
You still find lumps of coal on Prairie Portage. But his name was Andrew Jackson Powell.
Mm-hmm.
But if he was from Michigan, he could have been named after the
president. Yeah, he was native Michigan.
You know at Lac LaCroix, the Indian paintings on the rock there?
Yeah.
There's the letters 1781 on the rock. Did anyone ever tell you anything about those? Or
Pardon me, there was so-called scientists came through there different times. In fact, the American National Geographic, I didn't see that one, but I saw like a picture of an elk or a caribou, stuff like that. And I'm sure you're better versed in these so-called scientists. They can't, they, at that time, they couldn't figure out what type of paint or what is made out of anything. In fact, I think they went as far as to chip some of it, to take back and to have it tested.
I think that happened on Darky Lake, because there's chippings out of the rock painting on Darky Lake.
I hope to build a small park ranger cabin. I've been on Darky Lake too. I ranged through there, helped build a cabin on Darky, and I helped to build a cabin in Coney. I guess you've been all over the Quetico too, eh?
No, there's still parts I haven't seen.
No. Used to be fabulous fishing all through that country.
Is that right?
Oh, lots of fishing.
There was a story on Darky Lake too of someone finding a crucifix that was hanging in a tree.
Oh yes.
You didn't hear that
No,
story?
see, the French, as you know from history better than I do, see, the French were the first all through here, dating back to Radisson, maybe before his time. And I never met him, and he was dead when I went down there. It was they call him a famous priest, a Jesuit priest that known as Father Boo. I guess it must have been a German name. He was a missionary among the Indians, and I guess he tried Father Boo. I think it's a German name. I have a book